In the sixth episode, titled Land of Lies, Tariq is driven to discover what happened to Lauren and how Braden and Effie are related. He throws a couple punches at Braden before learning that Effie ruined their original scheme to get Lauren out of the city. Tariq turns to Effie and confronts her over the circumstance. Tariq ends their relationship and leaves her to fend for herself because he is unwilling to understand her justification. He even goes farther by getting in touch with Diana again, which pushes Effie over the limit. Speaking of Diana, I'm very relieved that the relationship between her and Salim is officially over. The Tejadas also host a burial and meal for Lorenzo in another location in this episode. Drew is adamant on locating the killer of Lorenzo and getting even. Kane and Diana advise Drew to wait and make sure before launching an all-out war, even though he believes the Russian gang is to blame. As we all expected, Drew attacks the Russians against their will, starting a war as they retaliate at Lorenzo's burial. Despite the fact that Munnet and Gordo were aware of the reality regarding Lorenzo's death, they both gave their okay for everything that happened. It's total mayhem and drama, as expected from the Power series. Now that he knows Lauren is alive, Tariq wasted no time in confronting Effie about what happened to her. In order to lure Effie to the same lake that Effie attempted to drown Lauren in, Tariq pretends to take her on a pleasant drive. He presses Effie for information, and once he receives them, he declares their relationship to be effectively over and leaves Effie to find her way back to Stansfield. He reignites his love with Diana to advance the situation. When Effie learns about this, she decides to shut down the coffee app that was being used to distribute drugs inside the Weston Holdings structure. Thankfully, Kane intervenes to prevent her from doing irreparable harm, but in this instance, we learn that while Tariq can utterly destroy Effie's world, she can do the same to his. The operation would have suffered greatly if the app had been deleted, just as Effie's long-term objectives would have suffered greatly if Tariq had excluded her from the operation. Now, Tariq and Effie can either work together to stay afloat or cause the other to sink. They are in charge. Even though they attempt to or claim to be total opposites, Drew and Kane have a lot in common. Kane suggested earlier this season, when he was on a power trip, that they kill their childhood pals to gain a bigger share of the drug market so they could sell more of Noma's goods. Drew abhorred the concept mostly due to the potential outcomes, one of which was an all-out war. In the present, the roles have been reversed. Drew is determined to exact revenge for the death of his father and is convinced that the Russian gang is to blame because they allegedly killed the Russian connection. Although Kane and Diana can see the reasoning behind it, they advise Drew to remain calm and wait until they are certain before acting because doing so would spark an all-out conflict. That only lasted so long as Drew finally arranges a scheme to kill one of the Russian gang members, which he successfully carries out with the aid of Gordo. As Kane and Diana foresaw, a war has broken out, and the Russians responded by opening fire at Lorenzo's burial. Kane is sometimes regarded as impetuous and a hothead, but Drew displayed these traits consistently throughout this episode. Yes, it was all for his deceased father, but Gordo is fully aware that the Russians had nothing to do with Lorenzo's death. Thus, it should have been handled with greater care. Sachs has gone to tremendous efforts to keep the St. Patrick family in prison for as long as possible ever since the beginning of the Power series. The same has been true with Tariq thus far in the series, just as he failed to do it with James and Tasha St. Patrick. There were times when he used all available means, legal and illicit, moral and immoral, to lock up the St. Patricks, and it cost him his position as a prosecutor. Sachs continues to pursue his objective of locking Tariq up in prison despite working as Tariq's defense lawyer. Sachs's pursuit of Tariq is justified, to be honest, but geez, he should feel some remorse for it. He may have feelings for Jenny Sullivan and a desire to imprison Tariq, as evidenced by the fact that he has flung himself at her feet. He also portrays Davis, the character who was saved from being abandoned on the streets in Season 1. All of Sachs's values, principles, and other foundational principles have been abandoned. There will be a cost for the manner he went about it, even if he succeeds in locking Tariq up and keeping him there. Davis will undoubtedly get rid of him, and Sullivan might as well. Future episodes will need to determine everything. There is some finger-pointing about the Lauren problem between Tariq, Braden, and Effie during the episode's main events, as Effie went too far with Lauren, which resulted in the federal authorities discovering her and utilizing her as evidence in the RICO case. Tariq believes Effie is to blame for how things have turned out. Tariq and Braden are both held accountable by Effie. In her eyes, Braden is at fault for failing to handle business and take care of Lauren to prevent a disaster like their current one, while Tariq is at fault for assuming Lauren would move and keep her mouth shut. Tariq and Braden both hold Effie responsible for derailing her strategy and resulting in their current predicament. The truth is that they are all equally to fault for this. Given that Tariq is the operations leader and has a lot on his plate, he must share some of the blame for becoming too close to Lauren. Braden is Tariq's sidekick, but he failed to ensure that their plan was successful. Last but not least, Effie escalated the situation by attempting to assassinate Lauren, but failing to carry out her plan. With the new knowledge they have about the federal government's ongoing case against them, Tariq, Braden, and Effie should refrain from pointing fingers and focus instead on acting submissively and staying out of trouble. They all have their share of mistakes in the scenario.